First contact gone wrong. The vast emptiness of space stretched out before the research vessel Enlightenment as it glided through the outer reaches of Galactic Coalition territory. Captain Nera stood on the bridge, her four arms carefully manipulating the navigation controls while her large, reflective eyes monitored the long-range scanners. The Enlightenment represented the peaceful coalition of 17 alien species that had formed this interstellar alliance over 3 centuries ago. Their mission was straightforward: catalog new stellar phenomena and search for potential civilization signatures. The coalition valued knowledge above all else, believing that understanding the universe was the path to harmony among all sentient beings. Captain, we're detecting an unknown energy signature at coordinates 334 to 27982, reported Science Officer Zend, the membrane around his skull pulsing with excitement. His species, the Voziri, were naturally attuned to electromagnetic fields, making them exceptional scientists. Nera moved closer, studying the readings with interest. Configuration doesn't match any coalition designs. Could be independent travelers or perhaps a new species to welcome. The signature is unusual, Zen noted, his voice whistling through speech membranes. It appears to be highly efficient, but with energy patterns I've never encountered before. Initiate standard greeting protocols, Nera ordered, her voice calm and measured. Let's welcome our new friends to Coalition space. Zend activated the transmitter, sending out the carefully designed first contact message. It contained mathematical sequences demonstrating intelligence, visual representations of coalition species, and peaceful intentions encoded in multiple formats. The Enlightenment was designed for scientific discovery rather than confrontation, its sleek hull featuring minimal defensive capabilities but extensive sensor arrays. Minutes passed as the crew waited, the bridge hushed with anticipation. Every first contact was a moment of historical significance, potentially bringing new knowledge and perspectives to the coalition. Captain, we're receiving a response, Zend announced, straightening in his seat. Nera nodded. On screen. The view screen flickered, but instead of the expected greeting, strange angular symbols flashed across the display. The patterns were jagged, aggressive, unlike any language the coalition had encountered. Communication Officer Trella, a luminary whose translucent skin glowed with mural activity, frowned as she studied the patterns. This doesn't match any known communication protocol. I can't determine if it's language or... A sudden alarm blared throughout the bridge. The tactical station lit up with warnings. Energy surge detected from the vessel, shouted Security Officer Kale, his scaled skin darkening with stress. They're powering weapon systems. Nera reacted immediately. Shields up. Evasive maneuvers. But the Enlightenment wasn't built for combat. Before the crew could fully respond, a blinding beam of crimson energy sliced through space, striking the ship's port side. The impact sent crew members flying as the deck lurched beneath them. Emergency lights flashed as acrid smoke filled the bridge. Direct hit to our main power core, reported Engineer Milo, her voice steady despite the chaos. Shields at 8% and failing. Nera grabbed the command console to steady herself. Open a channel. We need to make them understand we're not a threat. Trella worked frantically at her station. Channel open, Captain. Unknown vessel, this is Captain Nera of the Galactic Coalition ship Enlightenment. We come in peace. Please cease your attack. We wish only to... Another blast rocked the ship, cutting off Nera's words. A power conduit exploded near the rear of the bridge, sending deadly shrapnel through the air. 3 crew members fell, their bodies still. Return fire, ordered Nera, abandoning diplomacy in the face of the unprovoked attack. Weapon systems are offline, Captain, Kale replied, desperation in his voice. We can't defend ourselves. The mysterious vessel continued its merciless assault, each blast tearing through the Enlightenment's hull, destroying compartments and venting crew members into the cold vacuum of space. In the chaos, Officer Trella crawled to the emergency communications array. With shaking hands, she activated the distress beacon, encoding the ship's location and the nature of the attack. This is Coalition Vessel Enlightenment. We are under attack by unknown hostiles at coordinates 334 to 27,982. Multiple casualties. Request immediate assistance. Repeat. We are under attack. The bridge rocked with the most devastating hit yet. Part of the ceiling collapsed, crushing the navigation station. Captain Nera lay trapped beneath the debris, purple blood seeping from her wounds. Send the visual data, she gasped to Trella. They need to see what we're facing. Trella nodded, adding the sensor readings of the attacking ship to the distress signal just before another explosion tore through the bridge. The transmission cut off abruptly. The Enlightenment drifted in space, its once elegant hull now a twisted wreck of metal and escaping atmosphere. Of the 63 crew members, fewer than 10 remained alive, huddled in a sealed emergency compartment deep within the ship. The distress signal traveled through space, racing past stars and planets, carrying the final moments of the Enlightenment and the image of its attacker. Days later, it reached its destination, Earth's Interstellar Defense Force headquarters. The humans, the newest and most unpredictable members of the Galactic Coalition, received the message, and they prepared to respond. The distress signal from the Enlightenment arrived at Earth's Interstellar Defense Force headquarters during the third watch. Lieutenant Commander Reyes jolted upright when the emergency protocols activated, bathing the monitoring station in pulsing red light. Priority distress call from Coalition Vessel Enlightenment, announced the automated system. Classification: critical. Reyes accessed the message, her expression darkening as the details unfolded before her. The Enlightenment's final moments played out on her screen. The unprovoked attack, the desperate call for help, the sensor readings of the unknown aggressor. Without hesitation, she triggered the command-level alert. Within 15 minutes, Admiral Chen strode into the Emergency Operations Center, his weathered face showing no signs of having been woken from deep sleep. "Show me everything," he ordered. The staff projected the distress call onto the main screen. The room fell silent as they watched the destruction of the Coalition research vessel. When the recording ended, Chen turned to his staff, his eyes hard as polished obsidian. "The Enlightenment was an unarmed scientific vessel," he said quietly, "and the Coalition has been our partner since humanity first ventured beyond our solar system." He paused, looking at each officer in turn. "Prepare a response fleet. I want our fastest ships ready within 6 hours." "Sir," spoke up his second-in-command, Commander Walsh. "Protocol dictates we consult with the Coalition Council before." "I'm well aware of protocol, Commander," Chen interrupted. "But while the Council debates, the attackers will slip away. We'll notify them of our actions, but we're moving now." The news spread quickly through Earth's military channels. By dawn, the massive battleship Indomitable and its escort vessels were preparing for immediate deployment. The Indomitable represented the pinnacle of human military engineering, sleek and deadly, designed for speed and overwhelming firepower. Unlike the elegant, streamlined vessels of the older Coalition races, human ships maintained a certain brutalist aesthetic, function over form, every element serving a tactical purpose. Captain Mackenzie arrived at the launch bay as her crew made final preparations. A veteran of the Mars insurrection, Mackenzie had a reputation for unconventional tactics and an unwavering commitment to protecting the innocent. Her face bore few expressions, but her eyes revealed everything: calculating, intense, and eerily calm in crisis. "Captain," greeted Admiral Chen as Mackenzie approached the command platform. "You've seen the briefing." Mackenzie nodded. Unprovoked attack on a Coalition scientific vessel. No survivors confirmed. Unknown hostile with advanced weaponry. "This will be a rapid response mission," Chen explained. "Find the attackers, assess their capabilities and intentions, and neutralize the threat if necessary." "And the Coalition Council?" Mackenzie asked, knowing the diplomatic complexities that came with humanity's relatively recent membership in the Interstellar Alliance. Chen's expression tightened, They've been informed. A representative will rendezvous with your fleet at the edge of Coalition space. He lowered his voice. Between us, Captain, the older council members are concerned about our involvement. They worry we'll escalate the situation. Mackenzie's lips curved in the ghost of a smile. They invited us into the Coalition because we think differently than they do. Now they're surprised when we act differently. Precisely, Chen agreed. The Galactic Coalition has maintained peace for centuries through diplomacy and compromise. Admirable, but they've forgotten how to respond to genuine threats. He handed Mackenzie a data tablet with her official orders. They need us, whether they admit it or not. Across the galaxy, the Coalition Council gathered in emergency session. Representatives of the 17 founding species connected via quantum entanglement, their images projected around a circular table. The humans have already dispatched a military response, said Counselor Aaron, his crystalline body structure refracting light as he gestured in agitation. Without consultation or approval. Did we expect anything less? Replied Counselor Vox, her feathered crest rising slightly. This is why many opposed their admission to the Coalition. The eldest member, Counselor Zhou, raised a hand for silence. His species had evolved past physical form, existing as a luminous energy field contained within a specialized suit. The humans act quickly, yes, sometimes too quickly. But remember why we welcome them despite their youth as a spacefaring species. His voice resonated with the wisdom of 4 centuries. They adapt, they innovate, and most importantly, they survive. At what cost? Asked Aaron. Their history is marked by violence and conflict. A history they've worked to overcome, countered Vox. And now they send their ships to avenge not their own, but our people. After hours of debate, the Council reached a compromise. They would allow the human response fleet to proceed, but insisted on sending a senior diplomat to ensure Coalition protocols were followed. Back on Earth, the Indomitable and its escort vessels prepared for departure. Captain Mackenzie stood on the bridge, watching her crew at their stations. Lieutenant Rivera, her tactical specialist, was already analyzing the sensor data from the Enlightenment's final transmission. The hostile ship has an unusual energy signature, Rivera reported, like nothing in our databases. But I can track it. Mackenzie nodded. That's where we start. The trail will be faint after several days, but if anyone can follow it, it's you. As the massive engines of the Indomitable hummed to life, Mackenzie addressed her crew through the ship's communication system. We've been called to hunt a predator that believes it can attack without consequences. It's killed our allies and disappeared into the dark. But darkness is just another place to look. Her voice was steady, resolved. We are the hunters now, and we're closing in. The fleet parted Earth's orbit in a flash of blue light, accelerating to speeds that bent space around their hulls. The hunt had begun. The human response. The stars stretched into long streaks of light as the Indomitable and its escort vessels pushed their engines beyond standard safety protocols. On the bridge, Captain Mackenzie studied the tactical display where Lieutenant Rivera had mapped their quarry's trail. The energy signature is distinctive, Rivera explained, highlighting the faint traces on the holographic display. Their propulsion system leaves behind particles our sensors can detect even days later. Mackenzie leaned closer, eyes narrowed. They're moving fast, but not as efficiently as they could. Almost like they don't care about being followed. Or they don't expect anyone would dare, added Rivera. The bridge crew worked with quiet intensity, each having been hand-selected for this mission, the best Earth had to offer. Engineer Collins monitored the engines, occasionally overriding automated safety protocols to squeeze more power from the drives. The ship groaned under the strain, but Collins knew precisely how far he could push the technology. Captain, called Communications Officer Park from her station, we're receiving a transmission from the Coalition vessel Harmony. They've reached the rendezvous point and are requesting permission to dock. Mackenzie nodded. Grant permission. Have the Coalition representative escorted to the briefing room when they arrive. As the human fleet raced through space, They crossed into a region known as the Cerulean Veil, a sprawling dust cloud that obscured sensors and made navigation treacherous. The Indomitable slowed, its escorts forming a protective formation. "The trail leads straight through," Rivera noted, frustration evident in his voice. They knew this would complicate pursuit. Mackenzie considered their options. How long to go around? 36 hours minimum. And to punch through? Rivera hesitated. 4 hours, but we'd be flying blind. And if they're waiting on the other side? They won't be, Mackenzie decided. They don't respect us enough to set a trap. Not yet. She turned to Collins. Modify our forward shields to disperse the dust particles. We're going through. The fleet plunged into the veil, visibility dropping to near zero. The ships relied on quantum-linked positioning to maintain formation, each vessel transmitting its location to the others through subspace. For tense hours, they pushed forward through the swirling chaos. When they finally emerged, sensors immediately detected something ahead. "Multiple contacts," reported Rivera, his fingers flying across the controls. Small vessels moving in a search pattern. Mackenzie moved to the tactical station. "Show me." The display revealed 5 ships, each roughly a quarter the size of the Indomitable. Their design matched the vessel that had attacked the Enlightenment, angular with protruding weapon arrays and dark, energy-absorbing hulls. "Void Reavers," Mackenzie murmured, using the designation Earth Intelligence had assigned to the mysterious aggressors. "They're looking for something. Or someone. The Enlightenment might have damaged their main vessel more than we thought," Rivera suggested. Mackenzie made her decision. "Bring us to combat readiness, but keep power emissions minimal. We'll shadow them, learn their patterns before engaging." For 12 hours, the human fleet followed the Void Reaver scouts, staying just beyond detection range. The tactical team analyzed every movement, communication burst, and energy reading. Rivera worked without breaks, building a comprehensive profile of Void Reaver capabilities. "Their weapons are impressive," he reported during a briefing. "Energy output suggests they could cut through our standard shields in 3 direct hits, but their maneuverability is poor compared to our vessels. They rely on overwhelming firepower rather than agility." Mackenzie absorbed this information. "Then we don't give them clear targets. Fighting them head-on would be suicide. Hit and run," suggested her second-in-command, Commander Ortiz. "Exactly. We strike from multiple vectors, never staying in weapons range long enough for them to lock on." The plan was set. The human fleet split into 3 attack groups, each approaching from a different angle. The Indomitable would hang back initially, analyzing the Void Reaver response before committing to the battle. As the first human vessels closed in, the Void Reaver scouts reacted with surprising speed, forming a defensive circle. "They've detected us," reported Rivera, watching the enemy movements, "but their formation suggests they're not familiar with dispersed attack strategies." The first exchange of fire illuminated the darkness of space. Human ships darted in, fired precise shots at the Void Reaver engines and weapon systems, then veered away before the enemy could respond with their full firepower. The Void Reavers, clearly accustomed to enemies that either fled or engaged in direct confrontation, struggled to counter the guerrilla tactics. 2 scouts suffered critical damage in the initial assault. The remaining 3 adjusted their formation, overlapping their firing arcs to create a zone of continuous coverage. "They learned fast," muttered Mackenzie, watching from the Indomitable's bridge. Time for Phase 2. On her command, the Indomitable powered up its main engines and accelerated directly toward the Void Reaver formation. The enemy ships, detecting the larger threat, oriented their weapons toward the incoming battleship. "They've taken the bait," Mackenzie noted with grim satisfaction. "All attack groups, execute flanking maneuvers now." As the Void Reavers concentrated on the approaching Indomitable, the smaller human vessels swooped in from behind. Precision strikes disabled the propulsion systems of 2 more scouts. The final scout attempted to escape, accelerating away from the battle. "Track that ship," ordered Mackenzie. It's heading back to report what they've learned, and we're going to follow it straight to their main fleet. The first skirmish was over, with 4 Void Reaver scouts disabled or destroyed. But as the human fleet regrouped and prepared to pursue the fleeing scout, Mackenzie knew this was merely the opening move in a much larger game. The real challenge still lay ahead. The Indomitable's main briefing room had been hastily converted into a command center for the expanded mission. Star charts and tactical projections covered the walls, and in the center, a holographic display tracked the fleeing Void Reaver scout. Captain Mackenzie stood at the head of the table, facing not only her senior officers, but also the newly arrived coalition representative. Ambassador Thelios, tall and imposing with iridescent skin that rippled with emotion, observed the humans with an expression of measured concern. 4 enemy vessels neutralized, 1 fleeing directly toward what we believe is their main fleet, Mackenzie summarized. We're tracking it now. Thelios's voice was melodious but carried a distinct edge. The Coalition Council is troubled by your aggressive first contact with these beings. Rivera couldn't contain a snort of disbelief. First contact. They destroyed a Coalition scientific vessel without provocation. Indeed, Thelios acknowledged with a slight incline of his head. However, the Enlightenment's destruction may have been a misunderstanding. Cultural differences can lead to tragic miscommunications. Mackenzie's face remained impassive, but those who knew her well recognized the subtle tightening of her jaw. With respect, Ambassador, the sensor logs showed the Enlightenment transmitted standard greeting protocols. The response was immediate weapons fire. That's not a miscommunication. Thelios spread his long-fingered hands in a gesture of conciliation. Perhaps, but the Council prefers we attempt diplomatic solutions before further escalation. If we locate their fleet, you are to establish communication and give them time to prepare a proper welcome. Interrupted Security Chief Dias. Several other officers murmured in agreement. Mackenzie raised a hand for silence. We will consider diplomatic approaches if the situation allows, she said carefully. But my primary mission is to neutralize an immediate threat to Coalition security. The tension in the room was palpable. The Coalition, with its centuries of relative peace, viewed conflict as a failure of diplomacy. Humans, with their much bloodier history, understood that sometimes violence was the only language certain adversaries comprehended. The Council insists on restraint, Thelios said, his tone hardening slightly. Mackenzie met his gaze directly. I'm authorized to use my judgment based on battlefield conditions. Now, if you'll excuse us, Ambassador, we have a pursuit to plan. As Thelios left the briefing room, Mackenzie turned to Engineer Collins. What's our status? Collins, who had been working relentlessly since the skirmish, looked up from his data tablet. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, but his voice was steady. The Void Reaver weapons did more damage than expected. Their energy signatures somehow bypassed portions of our shield harmonics. Can you adapt our defenses? Already working on it, Collins replied, displaying a complex schematic. I'm modifying our shield modulators to create randomized frequency patterns. It won't make us invulnerable, but it should distribute the impact of their weapons more effectively. Mackenzie nodded. How long? 10 hours for the Indomitable. Another 24 for the escort vessels. You have 6, Mackenzie said, checking the pursuit trajectory. We can't let that scout reach its fleet with too much lead time. As the meeting concluded, Rivera remained behind. Captain, there's something else you should see. He activated a secondary display showing planetary scans. We analyzed the Void Reaver flight patterns before our engagement. They weren't just patrolling. They were scanning the system's planets with resource detection equipment. Mackenzie studied the data. What are they looking for? A rare element called novanite. It's used in advanced power systems and weapons technology. Rivera highlighted several planets on the display. These worlds all show evidence of recent mining activity, and all are registered as inhabited planets under Coalition protection. The implications were clear. The Void Reavers weren't merely passing through Coalition space. They were systematically harvesting resources from populated worlds. The danger was far greater than a single act of aggression. Mackenzie immediately called for another meeting, this time including Ambassador Thelios. When presented with the evidence, even Thelios couldn't dismiss the seriousness of the situation. These mining operations would cause catastrophic environmental damage to these worlds. Thelios admitted, studying the data. Millions of lives could be at risk. This isn't just about the Enlightenment anymore, Mackenzie pressed. This is about protecting Coalition citizens from an invading force. Thelios' expression remained troubled. The Council will need to convene to discuss this new information. By then, the Void Reavers will have stripped 3 more worlds bare, argued Rivera. A tense silence filled the room. Finally, Thelios spoke, choosing his words carefully. Official Coalition protocol would require confirmation of intent before military action. He paused, then added, "However, as an observer on this mission, I cannot interfere with your operational decisions if you determine an immediate threat exists." It was as close to approval as they were likely to get. Mackenzie recognized the subtle permission being granted. Act now. Deal with the political consequences later. Thank you for your insight, Ambassador, Mackenzie said with a nod of acknowledgement. We'll proceed with caution. As the pursuit continued, Engineer Collins worked without rest, modifying shield systems throughout the fleet. The human vessels pushed their engines beyond design limits, slowly gaining on the fleeing Void Reaver scout. Aboard the Indomitable, the crew prepared for what they all knew was coming, not just another skirmish, but potentially the first battle in a war none of them had anticipated. The line between defenders and aggressors had never seemed thinner, but with millions of innocent lives at stake, Mackenzie knew there was only one path forward. They would hunt the Void Reavers to their lair, whatever the cost. The fleeing Void Reaver scout led the human fleet deeper into uncharted space, its erratic course suggesting both haste and purpose. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Captain Mackenzie watched the tactical display with unwavering focus. The scout had maintained its lead, but the gap was narrowing hour by hour. "It's heading for the Eridani system," Rivera announced, highlighting the destination on the star chart. 3 planets, the second one habitable. Small colony established about 15 years ago. Mackenzie studied the information. Population: approximately 22,000 colonists, mostly agricultural settlement with limited defensive capabilities. Ambassador Thelios, who had taken to spending most of his time on the bridge, despite the tension with the human crew, moved closer to examine the display. "The Eridani colony falls under direct Coalition protection," he said, his skin darkening with concern. "If the Void Reaver fleet is gathering there, then those colonists are in immediate danger. We need to evacuate them," Mackenzie finished. She turned to her communications officer. "Send a message to the colony. Civilian evacuation, priority 1. Thelios' expression shifted from concern to alarm. A full evacuation would take days, perhaps weeks, and alerting the colony could tip off the Void Reavers that were coming. "I'm not leaving 22,000 civilians in the path of a hostile force," Mackenzie replied firmly. For once, Thelios didn't argue. Instead, he offered an unexpected solution. The Coalition maintains an emergency response fleet near the Procyon sector. They could reach Eridani within 24 hours and begin evacuation procedures. He paused. However, requesting their assistance would require Council approval. Mackenzie weighed the options quickly. "Can you make that request through your personal authority?" Thelios hesitated, then nodded. "As an observer in a potential crisis situation, yes. It would be irregular, but within protocol." "Do it," Mackenzie ordered. She turned back to the tactical display, her mind already racing ahead. The situation had presented not just a crisis, but an opportunity. As Thelios left to send his message, Mackenzie called her senior officers to the strategy room. Once gathered, she outlined her plan. The Void Reaver scout is heading for a rendezvous with their main fleet at Eridani. We believe they're targeting the colony for resource extraction. She brought up a detailed map of the system. With the colonists evacuating, we have a unique opportunity to set a trap. Rivera leaned forward, using the colony as bait. Exactly, Mackenzie confirmed. We'll position our fleet here, in the shadow of Eridani's third moon. When the Void Reavers arrive, they'll find what appears to be a vulnerable, partially evacuated colony. Engineer Collins, who had finally completed the shield modifications, raised a concern. Our intelligence suggests their fleet significantly outguns ours. Even with the improved shields, a direct confrontation would be costly. We won't engage them directly, Mackenzie explained. Not at first. She expanded the tactical display, showing the entire system. We'll seed these approach vectors with quantum mines programmed to activate only when Void Reaver ships pass. When they move in on the colony, we'll spring the trap, catch them in a crossfire between our fleet and the minefields. The officers studied the plan, offering refinements and identifying potential weaknesses. Mackenzie incorporated their suggestions, building a strategy that maximized their advantages while minimizing risk to both their fleet and any remaining colonists. 22 hours later, the Coalition Emergency Response Fleet arrived at Eridani and began evacuation operations. Mackenzie ordered her fleet to full stealth mode as they positioned themselves behind the moon, running only minimal systems to avoid detection. Commander Ortiz joined Mackenzie in the observation deck, where they watched the distant lights of evacuation ships departing the colony. Coalition ships have evacuated approximately 65% of the population, Ortiz reported. The rest should be gone within 10 hours. Mackenzie nodded, her expression grim. Let's hope that's fast enough. It wasn't. Just 6 hours later, sensors detected multiple ships entering the system. The Void Reaver main fleet had arrived earlier than anticipated. The massive vessels dwarfed the scout ship they had been following, their angular silhouettes bristling with weapon arrays. 9 capital ships and at least 30 support vessels, reported Rivera, his voice tense. Far more than we estimated. Mackenzie maintained her composure. Are the minefields in position? Yes, Captain, but with this many ships, they'll only thin the herd, not stop it. Mackenzie made a quick decision. Signal the Coalition evacuation fleet. Tell them to accelerate procedures and prepare for emergency departure. She turned to her tactical officer. Recalibrate our targeting priorities. We focus on their lead vessels first. Try to create a bottleneck in their formation. The next hour passed in tense preparation. The Void Reaver fleet moved methodically toward Eridani, seemingly unaware of the trap awaiting them. On the colony surface, the remaining evacuations proceeded with increasing urgency, shuttles lifting off in rapid succession. Void Reaver fleet is approaching the first minefield, announced Rivera. 3 minutes to contact. Mackenzie gave the order. All ships, final combat preparations. Weapons hot, shields at maximum. As the Void Reaver fleet crossed the invisible boundary, the first quantum mines detonated. Brilliant explosions illuminated space as several smaller Void Reaver vessels were damaged or destroyed. The larger ships, however, pushed through the barrier with minimal damage, quickly adapting their formation to the threat. They're accelerating toward the colony, reported Rivera. And they've detected us. Main fleet is splitting. 7 capital ships continuing toward Eridani, 2 breaking off on an intercept course for our position. Mackenzie stood at the center of the bridge, watching as her carefully laid trap began to unfold, though not exactly as planned. The Void Reavers had responded more quickly and efficiently than expected, but it was too late to reconsider. The battle for Eridani had begun. All ships, execute attack pattern Delta, Mackenzie commanded. The hunt is over. Now we fight. The Indomitable broke from its hiding place, engines flaring as it led the human fleet toward the approaching Void Reaver ships. Space lit up with weapons fire, brilliant beams of energy slicing through the darkness. The modified shields on the human vessels held against the initial Void Reaver salvos, dissipating the energy across their surfaces in rippling patterns. Shields holding at 83%, reported Collins from engineering. The modifications are working, but they're already adapting their weapons' frequencies. Mackenzie stood firm at the command station, issuing orders with calm precision despite the chaos unfolding around them. Focus fire on their lead vessel's propulsion systems. Let's see how they fight when they can't maneuver. The human fleet executed their hit-and-run tactics brilliantly, darting in to deliver devastating strikes before pulling back outside the Void Reaver's optimal firing range. The larger alien vessels struggled to track the more agile human ships, their massive weapons powerful but slow to target. On the colony surface, the last evacuation shuttles were lifting off, racing against time as the remaining Void Reaver ships closed in. "Captain," called Communications Officer Park, "the Coalition evacuation fleet reports they're at 92% capacity. 3 more shuttles, and they'll have everyone. Tell them we'll buy them the time they need," Mackenzie replied, her eyes never leaving the tactical display. The battle intensified as the Void Reavers, recognizing they were losing the initiative, changed tactics. Several smaller vessels suddenly broke formation, accelerating directly toward the Indomitable in what appeared to be suicide runs. "Evasive maneuvers," Mackenzie ordered. "All point defense systems, target those incoming ships." The Indomitable veered sharply, its engines straining against the inertia. Point defense lasers lashed out, destroying 2 of the incoming vessels, but a third slipped through and slammed into the battleship's starboard side. The impact rocked the Indomitable, sending crew members flying and destroying several critical systems. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut, containing the breach, but damage reports flooded in from all sections. "Starboard shield generators offline," Collins reported, his voice tight with effort as he worked to reroute power. "Hull breach on decks 4 through 7, casualties reported." Mackenzie's expression remained resolute. "Maintain formation. Continue the attack pattern." The human fleet pressed their advantage, targeting the weaknesses Rivera had identified in the Void Reaver vessels. One by one, the alien ships began to falter, their coordinated defense breaking down under the relentless human assault. "Captain," Rivera called out, urgency in his voice, "I'm detecting a massive energy buildup in the Void Reaver flagship. It's like nothing we've seen before." The tactical display showed the largest Void Reaver vessel disengaging from the colony approach, turning to face the human fleet. Its weapon arrays glowed with building power, the energy signature climbing beyond anything their sensors had recorded. "All ships, break formation," Mackenzie ordered. "Evasive pattern Omega." Now, the human vessels scattered just as the Void Reaver flagship unleashed its weapon, a coherent beam of destructive energy that cut through space like a scythe. One of the escort ships, the Defiant, couldn't maneuver fast enough. The beam struck it amidships, vaporizing the vessel instantly. 147 souls, Mackenzie whispered, honoring the crew of the destroyed ship. Then, louder, "Target that flagship with everything we've got. All vessels, converging attack pattern. We end this now." The remaining human ships regrouped and charged toward the Void Reaver flagship, weaving through its defensive fire. The Indomitable led the assault, its forward batteries unleashing a devastating barrage. "Their weapon is recharging," Rivera reported. "Estimated time to firing, 90 seconds. We need to get closer," Mackenzie decided. "Bring us within terminal range." Commander Ortiz looked at her in shock. "Captain, at that range, if their weapon fires, they won't get the chance."